Please join me in welcoming Dr. Nisha Manek.
I'm so delighted to be here, really. Every time I come to Austin, I love coming here because every time I come, there's a kind of vibrancy, of vitality that is so unique to this place. And then you come to the Unity Church. Then you magnify that. It's awesome. So thank you. And Joe and Lynn, come on. This is amazing. You've done an amazing thing. It takes a lot of courage to reach out. And then, you get doors sort of, I don't think so. Austin, give me a break. But when he called, and I was actually in Singapore, and he said something about subtle energies and Tiller, and Tiller celebrated his 90th birthday last week. At 90 years old, and you've had a full career, I think you have a right to just, sit by the fireplace and do more calculations, because he continues to do that. So we're going to explore some very interesting science today. Okay? Because science is about finding the truth. Spirituality is about finding the truth. They're not separate. They're really together. Complementary pathways to knowledge. So I'm thinking about all of these things, and we're going to talk about consciousness, that really amazing question that we all as human beings have. Because there are levels of consciousness. There's a plant, there's a dog, and there's you, and you're the one who writes Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. What makes you different? We're going to actually explore these questions and also look at the more modern take on consciousness, look a little bit at brain science and so forth. Okay? Next, Bill Tiller, my mentor. When I was I had a very successful, or continue to have a very successful medical career. I knew there's much, much more than what modern medicine does, which is chemistry. When I do a blood test, I'm testing your chemistry. When I give you a prescription, I'm doing more chemistry. Everything I learned in medical school was about chemistry. Yes, anatomy and function and all that, but underneath that is biochemistry, okay? It's very powerful. And from that has modern medicine grown. But I knew there's much, much more. There's a big gap in conventional care. We have excellent care here in America, and yet we do not have the outcomes. And I'm a rheumatologist, somebody who looks after patients with chronic diseases, rheumatoid arthritis, chronic pain, gout, lupus, Sjogren's. All of these are the people I look after. And they're the ones who came to me, and I was in a very academic situation. The ivory tower of randomized controlled trials of data. That's how we do medicine. We look at numbers. And then we try to fit them to you and me. Right? That's how we do medicine. But the patients were telling me something quite different. And many of them were practicing meditation. And I remember one young lady particularly, she sticks out in my mind. And so with my interest in mind-body medicine, I'm an integrative rheumatologist, I was invited to write a book chapter in the Mayo Clinic textbook of complementary medicine. And actually, complementary medicine is no longer correct. It should be integrative medicine, which speaks to the fact that conventional care and complementary therapy should work together. We're not opposites, okay? So, and really a lot of people now recognize that, so I will say integrative medicine. So as part of my interest, I was very, very keen to understand subtle energies. The subtle energies are the human biofield. Medicine has a very, very difficult time with this. We have struggled. And we've struggled for more than 2 to 3 decades just to even accept acupuncture. It's the truth. I mean, millions of dollars. And finally, the American Pain Society does recognize it as a legitimate way to alleviate pain. And now we have to get all our tools out there because we have an opioid crisis on our hands. So as part of this book chapter, I was really diving into the randomized control data, right? This is how science is done. It was pretty good. But I wanted to go deeper. I wanted to know, what is this energy? And I came into the work of WilliamATiller. The first paper I held of his, I couldn't understand every 6th or 7th word if I was lucky. But something about that paper told me I have to go to this man. It was an intuition. And so I wrote to him. You were lucky you got a reply. I had nothing for months, but I followed up, and all I knew was he had retired and was living in Scottsdale. And I was giving a lecture in Scottsdale, and I insisted on meeting him, and he finally did. And at that meeting, that dinner meeting in Scottsdale, where WilliamATiller and Jean Tiller were both there, I realized I found my mentor. Because you want to find the truth. You have to have a way. You need a guru. And if you have a guru, hang on to them because they will show you a way forward. And for me, it was science. How do you have science show you things about consciousness and subtle energies? Well, Tiller had balanced both worlds, and he did that exquisitely. Okay? So there was a problem. He told me, go back, you shouldn't meddle in physics. Door closed. Except a few months later, he called me back and said, I've been thinking. Medicine is stuck in chemistry. I think you could communicate to your colleagues something new. So one of those new ideas, I hope we have time tonight, is to open the doorway to a major paradigm shift. Chemical medicine, and bridge it over to information medicine. Okay? So park that. If we get to it, we get to it. If we don't, it's fine. Because in the end, and I was telling this to Joe, the masters are always in charge. Whoever is meant to be here today is you. You were meant to be here today. We cannot control that. I've seen this over and over again, wherever there's a talk or something about the Buddha's relics. And you might be even interested, Buddha's relics to medicine? Oh yeah? Because there is a connection. We tend to silo things. We don't need to do that anymore. Next. Tiller is a master engineer. He was a material scientist and an engineer. That's his background at Stanford. And I'll tell you, an engineer mindset is something that bridges things. He builds physical bridges that you see out there and you go over with your car. But he was bridging concepts, ideas that seem so separate. But in his mind, in his engineering mind, they're not separate. He also has a tremendous expertise. He was the world's expert in crystals, crystallography. Crystals are very special materials because they have atoms arranged in them in a very highly symmetrical fashion. And you know, symmetry in nature gives you a clue to higher realms. And I think Tiller was particularly blessed in this way. In his conventional training, he had engineering mindset. He had the symmetry know-how, which is it's an unusual kind of mathematics. Very few people have that. But he had another ingredient. He was a highly inner-managed individual. How many times do you see science and you have a bodhisattva in the same person? Tiller is a bodhisattva. He just happens to know math. Okay, he could do the links. So he's building a bridge so that science can comfortably cross over to spirit at the other end. Like I told you, they're complementary pathways to knowledge. Okay, next. So this is the connection I'm trying to make. It's a connection few people actually even know about, because we go about our days, we don't think about these things. But science and spirituality are connected, and we will show one way to do that, because the relics give us a way. Next question. Okay. And next question. So I'm going about my business 2009, and I get a phone call. Nisha, go to Minneapolis because the Buddha's relics are touring. And I thought, I don't know what relics are. I'm a Hindu. I was raised in Kenya. I'd never even heard about a relic. But what my friend told me got me hooked. She said, they're Buddha's relics and they're on tour. I called that monastery immediately. Next, you can read these slides. Next. So, and next. Okay. In medicine, when I talk about consciousness, the question of consciousness, what do I think about? It's in your skull. How else can it? It's here. And then I went to see the relics. And it was a Sunday. I remember it so well. My brother was in Minneapolis, St. Paul, flying home to Los Angeles. And I said, hey, Raj, there's a free exhibition of the Buddha's relics. It sounds really cool, just like our thing. We went. Now, before I actually tell you about my experience, I just want to do an experiment. An experiment that, you see, the question of consciousness has always been the realm of philosophy. It's a philosophical question. People sit in armchairs and they discuss philosophy of what is consciousness. That's why I said a plant is consciousness. It grows, have a little sunshine, a little rain, it does things. It's conscious. The dog, the cat, the goldfish, they're conscious. So we have to explore something about consciousness and our perceived notions about it. And actually, there is such science. Philosophy is no longer an armchair science, folks. They are actually leaving their armchairs and doing contemporary science in the field. In other words, we're testing these preconceived notions about consciousness, and it gives a very important clue to why we think the way we do. So next slide. Okay. So suppose you look around your home and you see 4 items. We're going to ask ourselves, what of those 4 items have a mind? You see a picture of your daughter, you see your goldfish, a toaster, and printer cartridges. This has actually been done. Joshua Knobe of Yale University has done this experiment in the field. Now, when you look at the 4 items, immediately you say the conscious things are goldfish and the human. Yeah, pretty obvious. So what? But think about this. How did you decide? How did you decide the human and the goldfish are conscious? And Joshua Knobe says that we decide how something has consciousness based on what it does, okay, its functional thing, and number 2, what it looks like. Those 2 major things, okay? It's simplified, but just hold that. So, next slide. So let's take 2 things from those 4, the toaster and the goldfish. And let's ask the question again, of the 2, what has consciousness? And right away you can say, the goldfish, so what? But why do you say that? It's because of what it does, its function, its behavior is complex. Fish food, it talks to you. You might go and tap on the glass, right? The fish behaves in complex ways. The toaster makes toast, right? So, next slide. We figure out whether something has consciousness by its behavior, its function. Okay, that's... All right, next slide. So let's do that experiment again, but this time, the human and a robot. We are in this realm of artificial intelligence. And again, this experiment has been done by experimental philosophy. And what they have said is, just take these two items, a human and a robot, and the robot, made of rubber, silicone, glass, whatever, wires, behaves exactly like the human. Exactly, in every way is human, okay? And they pose the question, does the robot believe it has two eyes? And most people will say, it does. Does the robot believe it has a nose and ears? Most people will say yes to that question. Now, if you ask the question, does the robot feel happy when it gets what it wants? Most people say, no. Notice that. Whenever you have phenomenal consciousness, it seems that our perceptions are, they're tied to the right kind of body. You can have a robot, the right kind of body, but we know it's not got the brain, okay? So it's tied up in there. So, next slide. Yeah. So, it seems that we have a notion that something has phenomenal consciousness, that is feelings. If it has a brain, it really is important. That's an important bias. We need to keep this in mind as we go through the evening, okay? Because we're going to revisit this. So next slide. So Buddha's brain, and this is where, we have studied the brain. We have studied the lamas, the Tibetan lamas, from His Holiness's, he has many of those monks who are literally Olympic athletes when it comes to meditation. 10, 15, 20,000 hours of meditation. And we know their brains are different. They're different than yours and mine. Their frontal lobes look different. Their happiness center looks different. So they are different. There's no question about that. Next slide. And embedded in this data is the fact that when you meditate, you can make your brain better. You can pump up that muscle of happiness, of serenity, of peacefulness. We know that. But I've said we have a bias with all of this brain research. Next slide. Okay. Now, with this question, let's pose the same question with these objects. Do these objects have a mind? Most people say, I don't know, it looks like fish eggs. I mean, I really have had that happen. Next slide. What if I told you that these are the relics of the historical Buddha? These are his blood relics, okay? And they're part of the collection that I saw. This picture was provided to me by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and I can freely use it. So by all means, if you want to take a picture of this holy picture, you can. So this is Buddha's relics, and this is what happened to me. Next slide. As I entered the monastery in Minneapolis that Sunday, I remember as I entered the doorway, it was like an immense presence. Immense, like Christ or Buddha was present. And it was a quiet Sunday. There was hardly anyone there. There was the monks on the side, and there was me and my brother. Next slide. The state was exquisite. There was no words to it. It was nonverbal. It was vast than anything I've ever felt. It was firm and gentle, almost paradoxical, but yet it felt familiar, like you'd come home. Next slide. There was a sense of peace, you know. I'm driving from Rochester, you know, the usual crowding things, and it all went. It just dissolved is the best way I can say. Next slide. Next. Okay. This was amazing. As I looked at the case with Shariputra, Ananda, Moudgalyana, these are disciples, the apostles, if you will, of Buddha, the first Buddhist council, yes? And I sort of knew them when I was little. I used to read books about these teachers. And there was this incredible feeling overcame me, and I literally grabbed the table and I fell to the ground. I was out, gone. I think I was like that for several hours until they closed the monastery. And I realized I couldn't think. I stood by my Jeep and thought, how do you switch this thing on? It was literally you had to call in a thought. Your mind became silent. It was exquisite and very hard to live in this reality, okay? You cannot, if you're suddenly there in that amazing space, it's very hard. And I've seen this over and over again. Next slide. Yeah. This feeling of unity was there. Next slide. So, as we left the monastery, my brother and I made an intention. We're bringing the masters home, whatever that meant. We didn't know. So, we want to bring this to our home. Now, the Relic tour had never been in a private residence before. This is nuts. But we wrote a letter to London, and we were granted permission. So the relics came to our home in Los Angeles. Next slide. So that's the poster for it. Next slide. The next series of slides, I may just say next slide, it's the opening ceremony of the relic tour, okay? And this is the head priest right in the front here of the Hindu temples in Los Angeles, and behind her is Rinpoche, the head monk of the Minneapolis temple who came to LA to help us. Next slide. This is the case of Shakyamuni relics, and you can see a little magnifying glass where you can really take a good look. Next slide. And within 2.5 days, we had about 3,000 people come through our living room. Just like whole of humanity, you know, dogs, children, wheelchairs. Everyone came. And you see their original face as they leave. Original face as they leave. And I was just sitting there. You're a host. And you watch this. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next. Lots of children. And they came to Kenya. Next slide. Yeah. And next slide after that. His Right Honorable Nyaga, he's a Minister of Cultural Affairs in Kenya. He opened the Relic Tour. And he's somebody who has actually done retreats in yoga. He says, I am so excited to be here.